President Trump, after listening to constitutional scholars, having even listened to Fox News, his greatest cheerleading network, I can tell you, President Trump is operating under a delusion, a constitutional delusion that he can order the states what to do. Remember, it's a federal system here in America, just like it is in Australia. You have the federal government and then you have the separate state governments. Instead of having only 7, here they have 50. So, President Trump is insisting he has the power to order these state governments to reopen whenever he tells them to. Now, the governor of New York says that's going to create a constitutional crisis like we haven't seen in decades. Let's not forget, in 1861, this country went to civil war over states' rights. Now, the head of the Governors Association, the association of all 50 governors, he's a Republican. He's from Maryland. He says, it's certainly not my understanding of the Constitution that the president can order this. I mean, the president seems to be ignoring or neglecting the 10th Amendment that says, unless it's spelled out in the Constitution, the federal government doesn't have the power and the power goes to the states. And this has been tested in the courts over, decades, if not 100 years. The president simply doesn't have the power. But at a press conference, when asked, what part of the Constitution gives you this authority, the president just said, numerous provisions, without being able to identify a single one. So I think the law's on the side of the governors here, and the president is barking up, some dark legal tree.
Yeah. And some scientists, meanwhile, Michael, are now saying that we may need to social distance until 2022. Is that right?
Yeah, mate. So get this. I mean, we're all going through this. You and I have talked about this. The great question is, when can we reopen the economy? When can we go back to sport? These sorts of things. All right, I don't want to get too gloomy, but this morning in the journal Science, there was a peer-reviewed paper that came out of Harvard that said we may end up having to have intermittent, rolling social distancing until at least 2022, because we don't know how the summer and the winter seasons are going to affect the coronavirus as it affects the flu. Will it dampen down and rise back up like the flu does? We simply don't know right now. The other thing is immunity. Okay, so you get the coronavirus, right? You may have antibodies now in your system to fight the virus. We still don't know if that means you're immune. We don't know if you can catch it more than once. So President Trump is looking at May 1st as a date that he's aiming for. His own experts have said that's overly optimistic. The governor of New York says we're simply not ready, and if we open too early, all of this will be for waste. It will have been a waste. The governor of New York says even when the death curve and everything else starts coming down, as we're all waiting, he says, we're not ready. We don't have the tools in place. We need to disinfect the entire subway system. We need to disinfect every bus. We need to disinfect every park bench. We need to have instant testing. We need to have better contact tracing. And here they're saying that, contact tracing, it may take 100,000 government employees to stay on top of the contact tracing. So you have an alliance, 2 sets of alliances here. The states on the East Coast have now all formed an alliance, and the states on the West Coast have all formed an alliance where they're going to work together so that they're not going to open one alone and the other alone. They're going to work together, and they're going to open together. They'll close together. They're going to learn from each other. This thing just does not ever seem to have an end.